So the passage that we're looking at has to do with lasting treasure. And this is also chapter 39 in the book Following the Call that we've been trucking through all year long. We've only got, what's that mean? We've got 13 chapters to go. So at the end of the year, we will have wrapped up the Sermon on the Mount. And I hope it's been an interesting journey for you. There is one quote I'm going to come up with in just a second. But here is the verse that we're looking at today. I'm actually giving you a little bit more, giving you the context before we actually look at the verse. So Jesus is talking. This is right after he teaches the Lord's Prayer, which we slowed way down for to get the gist of it. And he says to this, kind of continuing on the spiritual disciplines, when you practice some appetite denying discipline to better concentrate on God, otherwise known as fasting, don't make a production out of it. It might turn you into a small time celebrity, but it won't make you a saint. If you go into training inwardly, act normal outwardly. Shampoo and comb your hair, brush your teeth, wash your face. God doesn't require attention-getting devices. He won't overlook what you're doing. He'll reward you well. So the whole point of faith is not a show. It's not to put on the act to make God happy. You don't get any extra points for showing up today with God. God loves you just as much as if you chose to sleep in. But hopefully you'll benefit in other ways for coming today. I hope so. But Jesus goes on to say this. He says, don't hoard treasure down here where it gets eaten by moths and corroded by rust, or worse, stolen by burglars. Stockpile treasure in heaven where it's safe from moth and rust and burglars. It's obvious, isn't it? The place where your treasure is the place you will most want to be and end up being. I'll suggest to you that this is a truism, this last statement that he makes. The place where your treasure is the place where you'll most want to be and end up being. In other words, if your God is money or your God is stuff, if you are a God, if your God is consumerism, if that's where you live and breathe, that's where your heart is. That's where you're going to be all the time. I want to tell you, you're probably going to be miserable and have a lot less money in your pocket because you're going to continue to have to buy stuff to be happy. But that's where you'll be. You'll never be satisfied because every commercial break in the Niners game today is going to show you one extra cool thing that you're going to need. Or you're going to need to change your insurance agent because Jake is so much cooler than everybody else. You know what I mean? It's on and on and on. This is the world that we live in. But Jesus is also saying that there's a truth here about the character of God and living in the presence of God. That if that's where our heart is, that's where we'll be. And that's where we're headed. Now, I had a friend in college that strangely took this kind of literally. And he kind of thought that this was like a way to get rich in heaven. Like if you do good acts here, faithful acts, going to church, being nice to people, doing the right thing, obeying the laws and all that stuff, that you are giving yourself more jewels in your crown to come, almost like you're building up for yourself your afterlife pension. And he was serious about it. And I was like, what are you talking about, man? That's nuts. But he was honest about it. And maybe he still is. I don't know. He's a pastor now. And I wonder if he's like, well, just in case, I'm going to keep doing the good stuff because I want to have a sweet mansion, up in heaven someday. And it reminds me of the story that I've told many times at the memorial service about these two men. One is a pastor and the other was a bus driver. And they happened to die at exactly the same time. And they arrived at the pearly gates at exactly the same time. This is based on a true story. And so this pastor and the bus driver get there, and they are St. Peter at the gate. And he says, hey, welcome to paradise. Since you're both here right at the same time, do you mind walking together? And I'll escort you to your heavenly homes. And they're like, yeah, sure. Why not? We got all the time in the world. And so on they go, and they go through all these streets of gold, and they make their way to this gorgeous mansion. And they stop there, and Peter looks at the bus driver and says, congratulations, here is your eternal reward, this beautiful mansion. The bus driver is elated. He could never afford anything like this in this life, and now this place is amazing. Well, the person who had more joy than him was the pastor, because the pastor was thinking, man, if the bus driver gets that, how good am I going to have it? So Peter continues the tour through heaven, and they go beyond these mansions, with California-sized, property, and they get into estates, with lots and lots of acreage, and the pastor's just getting pretty excited. And they keep on going. And they finally turn down this little dirt road, and they follow this dirt road, and they end up at this shack that's just about to fall down. And Peter's looking at his clipboard and says, "Well, here you go, Pastor. Here's your eternal reward. Congratulations. Enjoy the rest of eternity." And the pastor gets a little bit indignant. And he's like, I don't understand. That bus driver got this incredible mansion, and I got this terrible beat up shack. What's the deal? And Peter's like, "Oh, that is kind of confusing." And so he looks at his clipboard and says, "Oh, yeah, here's the note. Apparently, when you preached, people slept. And when the bus driver drove, people prayed." It's not a bad joke. Yeah. That might be the one you remember. Might be the only thing you remember today. That's fine. Anyway, I don't think that's what this is all about. I think this has to do with something much more. There is a seduction, though, with heaven. There's a seduction with this idea that it's all just about getting to heaven. And evangelicalism, in particular, which is a branch of Christianity, has literally capitalized on this. That the whole point is getting you to say yes to Jesus so you know that you'll go to heaven. And then some churches, not all Baptist churches are like ours. There's this Baptist principle of once saved, always saved. Like you can't undo it. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. But there are a lot of Christian traditions that suggest that you can lose that salvation if you're not careful, if you don't show up to enough church services. I know multiple churches right here in town that if you don't show up enough, I don't know, your salvation, your heaven may be in jeopardy. So everything becomes about this forward thing. And some people get so seduced by that, they don't care at all really about this world. They don't care about taking care of this creation that takes care of us. They don't care about dealing with people so much because it's all about heaven. I even had one person that was so callous in this time of her thinking anyway, that when we were talking about sending money to help feed children in the slums of Nairobi, Africa, that her question for me is, why are we prolonging their life? Because if they die faster, they'll go to heaven. Sounds nuts, doesn't it? Well, that's what I'm talking about. In extreme, that's where an overly heavenly minded orientation creates a person who's of no earthly good, if you've heard the phrase, right? So there's another way. And so what today I want to do with you is I want to tell stories about two crosswalkers. One of the crosswalkers is going to tell some of his own stories. But I want to talk about, well, what does it look like to store up for yourselves treasure in heaven? And I'll give you a big clue. It has a lot to do with the word we use around here all the time, which is shalom. It's living a shalomy life. When you live a shalomy life, when you're rooted in shalom and trying to sow more shalom, living from a place of shalom, the love and peace and harmony of God in your life, and you're wanting to sow that around and do that for everybody and help other people experience this love and joy for all people, that's where the treasure is. That's when we find it. And so the stories I have are somewhat kind of be a good person kind of thing, but it's deeper than that. We don't need, on the one hand, this being a really good, wonderful person is a lot. It's actually subversive in some ways. But I do want to highlight a couple people. One of the people I want to highlight is Trudy Boucher, who happens to be sitting right there. And Trudy, she's been a part of our church many years. If I can tell a little bit of Trudy's story, she came to this church as a skeptic. She didn't really want anything to do with God. Was for good reason. The church has made its own bed, right? And so had a lot of questions. So for a few months, it was stump the chump meetings with Pete. Give me every tough question you got. Let's see if he can handle this one. And over time, through all these theological conversations, she fell in love with Crosswalk and fell in love with God and all the ways that we understand that. Eventually got baptized, has been a member of our church for some time, has served in many ways in our church. On our receptionist level, being a friendly face as people come and walk the door, do some light administrative tasks, that kind of thing. And there are some other things that you don't know that she has done that you've benefited from. They're unsung. Like there was this time, I think it was a couple years ago maybe, where we noticed that our sanctuary tables that we meet around were really dingy. I mean, they looked like they were as old as they are, 20 years or so, and that they'd had many potlucks and many spilled coffees and donuts on those tables. And there's stains all over, and you couldn't just wipe them off. Well, so Trudy asked if she could be helpful, and I was like, well, what do you think of this? He was like, well, I think I could give that a try. And so she put together a concoction of chemicals which are not allowed in the state of California and got to work scrubbing these things. And over the course of a week or 10 days or so, those lifetime tables got a new life and they looked brand new. That's something that was amazing that she just decided to do because she's that kind of a person. And the strange thing is after I don't think it was because she was high on chemicals. I think she genuinely, I think she genuinely got joy out of doing this service, which was beautiful. And then some time ago, she asked me for connection to how she might be more of service in the community, and I gave her some websites to go to, like more community service stuff, and that didn't really pan out. Then all of a sudden, I started hearing this news of something that Trudy was doing, which I thought was just fascinating. So I told her to come into my office and tell me all about it. So Trudy has a couple loves of her life that run deep with her. One is she loves to sew, but she's got plenty of clothes and doesn't want to sew any more clothes for herself. And she loves kids. Her career was as a teacher in the elementary schools. And so she has a soft spot for kids, and she knows that foster children, especially, have it especially rough. Foster kids are removed from their families because their families' systems at that point are dangerous. They cannot thrive in those systems. And so the people who examine such things and make such decisions make a decision that the child will be better off removed from home and go into somebody else's house for their well-being. It's a tough, tough call. Tougher sometimes on those children, especially if they're very young and don't understand really what's going on. All of a sudden, they're leaving their house with maybe just a backpack full of a few clothes and a stuffed animal or something. Well, so Trudy had a heart for these kids, and she had an idea. Thinking about her love of sewing and the fact that children gravitate onto either a stuffy, a stuffed animal, a stuffed bear or dog or something, or dolls, her idea was born. By the way, just out of curiosity, when you were a kid, did you have a favorite stuffed animal? So raise your hand. All right, yeah, a bunch of you. I had one. I had a couple bears that were my pals that I took everywhere I went till I was 18. Well, not really. So Trudy's idea was this. She called up Expressions of Hope, which is an organization in town that works in foster care. In fact, we are in a way partners with them because they have a storage box on our property, among many other nonprofits. They keep their supplies here because space is hard to come by, and we want to help with that project. And so she contacted them and asked if she could donate something. And the idea was this. Have you ever heard American Girl dolls? Any of you familiar with those? Those are ridiculously expensive dolls that you can go visit where they're made in Chicago and spend a fortune on doll clothes and stuff. They're amazing. They've got internet backstories and little cartoon videos are made for them. Well, Walmart sells knockoffs of American dolls. And Trudy's idea was, speaking to Expressions of Hope, can I buy some American dolls and make outfits for these little dolls to give to these foster kids so that they have a friend to take wherever they go? Isn't that cool? So Trudy came in and she brought some of these friends. And the whole time she was expressing this, I was just smiling because I thought it was so cool. I mean, what an amazing thing that she's doing. She's loving to do this. It's at her own expense where she goes and buys some of these dolls at Walmart. And they come with one set of clothes, and she makes two more to give to the kids when they go. And she told me a little bit about the story and what's involved with that. There's not a fabric store in Napa anymore. So you know where she gets her fabric? Community projects. She finds clothes that are dirt cheap that she likes the pattern. And so she repurposes clothes that have been donated, gets it cheap, and then makes some cool stuff. Right now, Trudy's favorite, unless it's changed over the last few weeks, is this little girl right here who she made this cool little plaid outfit as pajamas, but it's too cool for pajamas. So we think she's going to run for office someday. But anyway, can you imagine you're a little girl and that now Christmas is right around the corner. So I imagine that Trudy's going to be kind of busy in the next few weeks. But can you imagine you're a little boy or girl and all of a sudden you're given this gift of somebody else to take care of. And you've got an opportunity to let your imagination fly, which is so important for children's development. Get to be creative, create a storyline. Oh, it's bedtime. Now we're going to put your pajamas on. All this stuff. I mean, my daughter loved dolls, and she would care for her doll and swaddle her dolls. I mean, it was a real thing, kind of a pain in the butt sometimes, but it was a beautiful, wonderful thing, right? And Trudy is doing this because she just gets to. I don't know, the nudge of love just said, hey, what about this idea that nobody's had? And she just went for it. That's an act of living in the kingdom of God. That's an act of shalom. That's an act of storing up for yourself treasure in heaven. You know what I noticed about Trudy when we had this meeting is I never heard one thing come out of her mouth. I never saw a scowl on her face. And I said, oh, gotta make some more clothes for the dolls. None of that. It was pure joy. It was joy to buy it, joy to give it, joy to make it. She's living in the kingdom of God. She has the right perspective to be in it now, not waiting for later, but experiencing the joy of this connectedness and generosity now. There's a quote from, I think I skipped it. Yep. From Clement of Alexandria, who lived in the 2nd century. He's an early Christian theologian and philosopher. And he said this, in the end, it is not the one who keeps, but the one who gives away who is rich. It is giving away, not possession, which renders a person happy. The fruit of the Spirit is generosity. It is in the soul, then, that riches are found. For righteousness is true riches, and the word is more valuable than all treasure, not accruing from cattle and fields, but given by God, riches which cannot be taken away. Well, my next story is going to come from his own mouth. And I want to invite Bob Nations up to the stage. Some of you know Bob. Let's welcome Bob to the stage.
Hi, everybody.
So one cool thing about Bob, Bob's been a part of Crosswalk since we opened, really, after COVID. Yeah. And has been a faithful member ever since, now serves on our board and has helped in many other ways. Bob's a successful businessman. If you've ever heard of Senior Helpers, which is a care company that helps people stay in their home and gives them the care that they need. Bob owns Senior Helpers in 7 counties here in the Bay Area. And one of the things that is just beautiful about Bob, in my opinion, is he's successful for sure. But that's not where his treasure is. His treasure is where he is a heart-forward person. And the reason I know that first is just getting to know Bob. And by the way, this is the kind of thing that makes Bob about as uncomfortable as possible, right? But I've known that personally through our conversation and what he values and what he sows into, not just for Crosswalk, but for the broader community to help all kinds of organizations thrive. But then he published a book recently, just in April. And it tells stories about lessons he's learned from caring for the elderly right here in Napa. And when you read these stories, by the way, I linked this in my blog today so you can find it. It's called Navigating the Art of Aging. And he tells stories that he's learned along the way of helping people. And they're all heart-forward stories, things that he kind of had to do as a businessman, but it wasn't the business that was really making the impact. It was his heart and caring for people along the way. And so I love this because you have an example of somebody who's doing both, who's experiencing success because of hard work and his decisions that he's made, but he's also experiencing this kingdom success of experiencing this other thing that God is doing in our world. And I think that's where he finds the greater meaning and the greater joy. So Bob, by the way, he is married to Heather, and they have 2.5 kids together. The half kid is can't really call him a kid anymore, but an adopted guy from Africa who now plays for the NBA in Atlanta. You can see him now and again. But Bob, did I miss anything on that? You want to?
No.
You want to give some of your background?
Well, I'm a retired toy executive. I spent my whole career, corporate America, working for Mattel. I always say dressing Barbie dolls and racing Hot Wheel cars. But then I moved on to Hasbro, which is the G.I. Joe company in Milton Bradley. Well, the last 8 years of my 10-year career at Hasbro, I ran their candy division. We took candy and toy and put it together. Well, that division was based here in Napa for a long time, but then it got moved to Philadelphia. I didn't want to move to Philadelphia. I lived in Napa. Who wants to live in Philadelphia from Napa, right? So I didn't want to go. Hasbro's based in Rhode Island. I thought about moving there, but the truth of the matter is I love living in Napa. So I decided to take some time off, and I wanted to do, what came to me was doing something community-based. So I started researching that. I came across the concept of home care some 19 years ago. I thought that'd be really cool. I can take my experience running a business for Hasbro and turn it into running a business to help people with their moms and dads, or in the case was my grandmother who had Parkinson's. So I opened up Senior Helpers some 18 years ago. And over the course of that 18 years, we've helped thousands of people in what Pete says is 7 counties that we operate in. But once in a while, we come across people that need more than just a caregiver coming in their home. And that's where I've stepped in personally and become what I consider a surrogate child. So I've become the son of a number of people, and that's what the stories are about. People have come to me and said, Bob, you have such great stories. You should share them. And I always thought, who would want to read a book that I'd ever want to write? But I started thinking about, well, as I retire now from this business and this part of my life, how could I extend that? And so I wrote this book with the idea in mind. It's an extension of what I've been doing the last few years.
Awesome. So I've asked Bob just to share a couple of these stories to help us get into his world and what he's seen and what he's lived.
So the story that resonated with me this morning when I came into church was this lady that lived here in South Napa, lived in one of those 1950 houses. I got called one day. This man who represented himself as being her nephew said she needed help. He lived in Oakland and he'd only come up on the weekends, but she needed a little bit more help. So he wanted to hire us to provide a caregiver. So I went, did our normal process, got her on board, and we sent a caregiver there once a week. Problem is that one day I was going to Bottle Rock, actually. It was the weekend, and Adult Protective Services called me and said, Bob, are you involved with this particular individual? And I said, yeah, we provide a caregiver once a week. And the gentleman who called me said, "Well, she needs more. I need you to come and meet with us because there's been a problem. She's called the police, and this man had threatened her in some way, and she was afraid of him now, and that left her with nobody." So fast forward to that Tuesday, I go down to her home and meet with her and Adult Protective Services. And we determined that what he's done is he said, if you don't start doing what I want you to do, then I'm just going to move you in a nursing home and sell your house. And through the course of their relationship, he had become power of attorney and actually had gotten written into her will. Well, come to find out, he wasn't a nephew at all. He was a man that had done this multiple times with other people in the community. And this all got uncovered to me through the process. So not having anybody in her life, I kind of stepped in as her surrogate son. And she had quite a bit of things going on medically. She walked with a walker. She couldn't see well. So she had a number of things going on. And she didn't have a lot of money. She didn't really have any income outside of her Social Security. So we had just started what's called PACE, which is a medical-related offering here in the county, just started a couple of years ago. And I advocated for her to get her on PACE because that provided me the outlet to provide medical services for her. And so we got her on PACE. And so they kind of took over her medical side. And because I was providing caregiving services, I didn't feel comfortable with paying her bills because that would mean I'd be writing a check for me out of her account to pay for our services. So I didn't feel comfortable. So I advocated for the public guardian to conserve her and take over. So they did. So the 3 of us worked as a team to manage her life, to keep her in her home for as long as possible, because that's generally what I've always strived to do. Well, it became very problematic because I would get calls from 911 because remember, I'm the person that 911 is going to call because I'm her surrogate son. And what would happen would be she'd get on our walker, and even though she'd been in our house for a very long time, and she knew how to navigate, even though she couldn't see well, she would find that she had gotten herself in the bathroom and had gotten her walker tied up with the toilet or with the bathtub and couldn't get out, nor could she see how to get out of it. So 911 would call me and say, "Hey, Bob, we need your help." And I'd go over and rescue her. Well, it became so often that I finally had to say, enough's enough. You're not safe. I travel. I can't run over here all the time. So we ended up having to move her. It was a sad day, but it was the right thing to do for her. So she eventually moves and passes away. And unfortunately, this man still was on her estate. So there had been a big fight over her estate. And I didn't get involved in all that. So the other story that resonated with me is because we all experienced the fires, and I didn't tell this story this morning, but one of the things that I did when I started this journey is I wanted to learn about nonprofits. So I joined a nonprofit and I met this man, Walt. He was on the board of this nonprofit, and this nonprofit deals with people with disabilities in our community. And the reason he was on the board because his daughter had a disability. And so he was trying to support this nonprofit that was supporting his daughter. Well, I joined the board as kind of this business guy, and so he calls me to his house one day to meet his wife, who's this little Chinese lady, lovely lady. And they had met with me because they had gotten older, but because their daughter had disability and their oldest son lived in Washington, D.C., they were concerned if something ever happened to them, what would happen to her, because she was prone to have seizures. So they wanted me to take responsibility if something happened to them, that I would take care of her while the son made some determinations about her. So time goes by. Of course, I agreed because that's who I am. So I agreed to do that once they were gone. So time goes by. He falls, hits his head, and ends up passing. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The fires come in 2017, and their house burns down, and the three of them have to be relocated. So the son in Washington, D.C., and I worked to find them a rental house in North Napa. Of course, they've lost everything. So for a couple of weeks from that, I provided food for them. I would cook meals, crock-pot meals or whatever, and bring it over to their home, which she did not like because she did not like the fact that I was feeding them. But anyway, we got over that. She has a stroke about a week after the fire and is paralyzed on one side, which made the problem even worse, right? So, I started looking after them, and eventually the son was able to negotiate. He's a lawyer, so he negotiated a great deal with the insurance company, got their house rebuilt. We got them moved back into their house out on Silverado Trail. He was a school teacher, and so they didn't have a great deal of money, but the son built a fabulous home for them. Anyway, he falls, hits his head, and ends up passing away. So now it's just mom and the daughter, and things are going along until the mom starts to fail. And first thing that failed was, of course, she fell in her home. So I started going out and seeing her. We ended up providing a caregiver for her. And I went through the remaining days of her life being the extension of her son in Washington, D.C. So I helped as much as I can going out there. Now we fast forward, she's passed away. And now the promise that I made years ago, take care of the daughter. And that's what we do today. The son calls me periodically and says, Bob, I need her to go to the doctor. It's beyond what anybody else is capable of doing. Can you go? And so I go and get her and take her down to Kaiser. And she's had knee surgery recently. She broke her ankle. There's a number of things, but she is prone to seizures. So the people that I do have going there, the caregivers I do have going there, are trained on what to do with a seizure. And we take care of her and make sure she's taken care of. And she's insisting that she never wants to leave that home. And so my job in life is to make sure that she's taken care of for as long as she wants to remain in home. And she doesn't want to move to Washington to live with her brother and his family. So that's something that I signed up for, and I love the fact that I'm part of it and I get to be part of it. The one story this morning, unfortunately, that I tell because it's the one that most resonates with me, and it always, unfortunately, makes me cry. So if I cry, I'm sorry, but it's the story. So this man I came across very early on in my career here in Senior Helpers, and he calls one day and says, Bob, I need your help. I saw your ad in a magazine. Can you come over? And I went over, and he was a very mild man, very small in stature, very mild, humble little man. He was a school teacher in San Mateo. He taught art and music. And I said, okay, so how do you need my help? You seem to be getting along just fine. He goes, well, the doctor has taken away my driver's license. And so the doctor had contacted the DMV and told him that he could no longer drive. And they took his driver's license away. And he was panicked now because he didn't know what to do. How am I going to get to the barbershop? How am I getting to the grocery store? And I said, I can fix that, because that's what we do, right? So got a caregiver going and periodically. And as time goes on, he needs more and more help. Well, again, he doesn't have a lot of money. So I did find out in meeting him that he was a veteran. And so I knew of a program called Aid in Attendance through the Veterans Administration. So he and I sit one day and did all the paperwork, filed the paperwork with the county Veteran Services Officer, got that done. Well, back those years, it took a long time to get that approved and get that benefit happening. So we bridged it the best we could. And then one day he calls me and he goes, you've got to come over here right now. And he had this panic sound in his voice. And I'm like, okay, I'll get in the car. And I drove over. His name was Frank. So I drove over to his house, and he lived in this little humble little bungalow. And I said, okay, Frank, what's wrong? And he goes, oh my gosh, look what I got in the mail today. And he opens up a check, because this program in itself reimburses you retroactively from the day you filed. So from the day we filed for this benefit, he'd been collecting all this money that they owed him, and he got the check. It was a $30,000 check, and he was so emotional about the fact, because it was the most money he'd ever received in his life. So he and I celebrated that, and then we started doing other things, getting out in the community and going to have dinners and lunches. I'll never forget the day I took him in and out the first time in his life. But the real sad part of his story is not that. It's the fact that he had moved from San Mateo to Napa with his mom to be closer to his sister. His sister had become ill, if I remember correctly. And shortly after moving the two of them here to Napa, she passed away. And the mom, being the older of the three, also passes away. And this all happened in very short order. And this would also happen very shortly after they moved to Napa. So Frank had no community connections whatsoever in the community, because he didn't know anybody. He didn't go to church. He didn't have any social connection. All he did was go to the barbershop, go grocery shopping, and come home and play his piano and cook and all those fun things. So he had no connection. So I became his connection to the community. And it was a very special thing for me, because I bonded with him. Sweet little old man. And there was even one Christmas I needed to go to Texas to visit my family, and I was worried about him being alone. And I begged an assisted living here in town to let me have a respite room for that week so that I could move him there. And I convinced him he was going on vacation to a resort. So he was willing to go, and he moved into this assisted living for the week. And of course, when I came home, he went back to his home. The story goes, though, he always wanted to die in his home. And when we reached a point the day we went to the doctor, and the doctor announced to him that he had cancer and it was terminal, there wasn't anything they could do, that he and I went home and cried about it. But we worked really diligently to set up his home environment so that he could, in fact, live out his hope and dream to die beside his piano. So, sorry. So when hospice got involved, I insisted that his hospital bed had to be put in the same room with his piano, and that's where he passed away. But just before, about a week before, I'd come to visit, and he happened to be asleep. And when I walked in the room, he's laying in a hospital bed, very pale and very frail looking. And I started crying because I knew the end was near. And he opens up his eyes real big, and he goes, Bob, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And I said, oh, I'm just sad that you're going to be leaving me soon. And he goes, oh my God, no one's ever cried for me. And that made me cry even more. So it was just, it's an impactful thing, because I became his connection to the world. And it was up to me to make sure that he got to do what he wanted to do when he wanted to do it. And I'm very proud of the fact that he did. So, and I have lots of stories, but I could go on all day.
Yeah, that's beautiful stuff, Bob. Let's thank Bob for sharing his life and stories with us. Very good. Thank you. He didn't want to say this, but I'll tell you, get the book because they're heartwarming stories and insightful things from his experience in dealing and helping and serving the elderly here in Napa. Just beautiful stuff. So highly recommend it. And I hope you'll get it. Thank you, Bob, again for doing that. It's really great. This past week, an album was released by. Oop. You want to refresh me, Ted? Get my tech working here. An album was released by a couple, Natalie Cressman and Ian Facchini. Now, I had never heard of this duo before. It may or may not eventually get up there. We'll see. The Board of Stewards, for my 25th anniversary of being a pastor here at this church, did some special things for Lynn and I. And one of those things was they got us tickets to hear this particular group. And never heard of them. I was at the Blue Note, and it was a very strange combo. She's a trombonist and singer. She doesn't do it at the same time. But but you don't hear trombonists come through all that long. And then this guy that's with her plays guitar. And so we went with no background, no expectation, And we were absolutely blown away at how incredible this music was. Turns out that when she was just 17 years old, she was identified in the jazz world as a rising star in terms of trombone jazz music. And when she played, it was the smoothest stuff you've ever heard. Just amazing. I played trombone as a kid and jazz trombone too. So I really appreciated this. I was geeking out about how good she was. Anyway, incredible music. They ended up falling in love and getting married. And there was in the she wrote this, which I thought was really provocative. And she has this word about revolution in there. And we often don't think about doing the things of the kingdom of God, storing up for ourselves treasure in heaven as revolutionary. But listen to how she describes it. So musicians Natalie Cressman and Ian Fakini say this: the general theme of the album is about finding beauty in the simple rituals of everyday life, celebrating the essence of what makes us human in a world mixed in conflict can be one expression of revolution. Let me just say that again. Celebrating the essence of what makes us human in a world mired in conflict can be one expression of revolution. There's a quote from one of her lines in one of her songs: the poetry was in flower, bread, words, and speech. And her encouragement: we hope you find it soothing and that it makes you want to be kind to a stranger today. If you want to be filled with dread and sorrow, watch more news. That's all you got to do. If you want to walk around with a dark vision of the world and how terrible everything is, watch more news, because that will do it to you. That's why they exist. If it bleeds, it leads. And so you're going to be bleeding right along with it. But if you want to be countercultural and you want to see the world change in ways that you can actually affect it, this is stuff you can do. And it's just as easy as you being shalomi wherever you go. This kindness thing that we talk about, just random acts of kindness, that's deeply spiritual stuff. You change the day for people. Just yesterday, Len and I were at a store and having to return some stuff. I went on to look for a tie for my daughter's wedding, and Len took whatever she needed to return to customer service. And she could tell while she's approaching that they just dealt with a really grumpy customer. Now, I got to tell you, these gals who work in retail, and men too, but retail is tough work. It's usually underpaid, and it's just hard work. Because if people have a problem, they're going to throw it all up right over you, and you're not getting paid enough to deal with that nonsense, right? And these two, in this case, women who are in the customer service department, they had just received a boatload full of grumpiness, right? And so they're kind of talking under breath. Their faces are kind of downtrodden. And Lynn walks up and just says, "I'm so sorry you have to deal with this stuff. I can't believe you deal with it. I wonder how you get along. This must be so hard to deal with customers like this." And, just for her acknowledging that they had to deal with really awful stuff from other human beings was a game changer. And all of a sudden, they were feeling affirmed in their life and their work, not feeling like they failed in some way because a customer had said so. Their frowns turned upside down, and before you know it, they're all smiling and having pleasant conversation. Later on, I needed to buy a tie, and I didn't have the 30% coupon, and the person gave it to me anyway because Lynn was nice. So it kind of came back for me, but that's not the point. When we left the store that day, Lynn was talking about what happened, and she was talking about how amazing it was, and she wasn't patting herself on the back or anything like that. She was just saying, what an interesting thing, that a small thing that I chose to do because I could see that the need was there changed their day. They could have had a terrible day for the rest of the day, but I got to see what happens when you're kind and you're shalomi with somebody. And guess what it did for Lynn? Made her day. Well, that's free, my friends. This kind of stuff, this treasure from heaven, it's unending. It's all over the place. Why aren't you getting more of it? It's not financial. That's not the point. This is the stuff of love and joy and peace and making harmony, and it's everywhere. How can you do something with that? So we have this phrase that if you pay attention, you see it on your way out every week. It's on a sign as you exit our parking lot. It says, "Go be Jesus." We've had this as sort of our tagline for 20 years, something like that. Go be Jesus. It's simple, but it communicates volumes, doesn't it? because Jesus was known as the guy who would go where maybe other people wouldn't, to talk to the people that other people wouldn't talk to. He's the guy that strikes up the conversation with the enemy, the Samaritan woman, or the jerky Pharisee, who thinks they're better than everybody else, or the enemy of the state, the tax collector, right? Or the person who's high up in rank in the Roman military. He's the guy that cut through all the lines and just saw a human being. You can do that. You get to do that. And don't worry about your crown in heaven. I'm sure whatever heaven's going to be, it's going to be better than we can imagine. Don't worry about saving up for that pension, because the experience of joy you can be in right now is unending. And it's here for you. Or maybe you're going to be like a Trudy, and maybe just hearing that she sensed the nudge of love to do something that brought together her passion for children and her love of sewing. And maybe there's something stirring in you. You're like, hey, I never thought about that. Nobody told Trudy to do this. It just came to her. And now she's got this beautiful thing going. Oh, maybe that's you today. Maybe something in this kingdom treasure stuff is starting to bubble in you, and you get to do that. Or maybe you're like Bob, who you're a dedicated Jesus follower in your line of work, but you can bring more heart to it. You can bring more love to it, more joy to it, because I'm telling you, I've seen the guy in action. I've been with him, going into a home of an elderly person, and he's not Mr. Business there. He's gregarious Bob, who just loves people. And I've seen him do whatever it takes with his own truck to pull whatever equipment, get share the care, which he helps start, which is helps get free stuff to people who need it, who can't afford the medical goods and stuff like that. I've seen him personally take that stuff. Well, that's just being a good human being, a lovely human being, a Jesus human being. How can you go be Jesus? Because there's treasure there. There's treasure to spread around the world, to fill your heart. And I tell you, if you're feeling gloomy, if you're feeling dreaded, and you can't control what's happening on the global or national scale, you can control what happens in your next interaction. You can control what you're feeding your head. You can control, at the end of the day, how you feel about that day. So go be Jesus, and may you experience the treasure of the kingdom of God flowing into your life. Thanks for coming today. Hope you had a good experience. We'll see you next week.